Knowing the variability in our dataset is critical to making sense of our data. Let's learn how to calculate standard deviation in JASP. We will begin this example here in Excel. We have the same data as we used previously when we did this example by hand in class. Groups of teens and adults were asked to describe the plot of a movie, and the linguist researcher counted the number of times each one used the word like in their description. Remember that we entered these data on sheet 1 of the workbook and then copied them onto sheet 2. That way the original data will still be on sheet 1 without additional calculations. Our plan is to import this data into JASP and then find the means and standard deviations for both adults and teens. When you plan to import data from Excel into JASP, do 3 things. First, put simple variable names on row 1. Second, put your cleaned data on sheet 1. However, there is a third thing that we must do before importing data. JASP will not read a native Excel file. If the file has the suffix .xlsx, then we must save this data into the comma-delimited file called a CSV. In Excel, go to File, Save. Save the file as LikeLike to the desktop in the format comma-separated values CSV. You may get a warning about losing information. This is because the transformation of our workbook into a CSV will only save the data on the first sheet. Of course, we still have the original file, so no worries. Click Continue. Now we have our data saved to the desktop in a format that JASP can read. We open our dataset in JASP by clicking on the upper left corner main menu icon, and then selecting Open, Computer, Desktop, LikeLike.csv, and then clicking Open. Let's take a look at our data. The variables have imported, but we need to make some changes. Both of these variables are scale level, so make sure that JASP imported them as continuous data. If it did not, we would change that by clicking on the icon and resetting the level of the data. That is all that we need to do for these simple data, so we are now ready to analyze. Go to Descriptives, Descriptive Statistics. In the results pane, we see the table where the descriptive statistics are going to appear. Move the variables adult and teens into the variables box. Here we see the JASP progressive disclosure. The results appear as soon as we enter the variables. Now click on the disclosure triangle next to Statistics. Here we find a list of available statistics for our variables. We want mean and standard deviation, both of which are selected by default. We can turn off minimum and maximum, but let's get variance, range, and interquartile range. With each click, new results are added to our table. We can see that teens use the word like approximately twice as often as the adults did, but that their standard deviations were similar, 2.1 versus 2.97. Remember that standard deviation is the square root of the variance. Also remember that values calculated by hand, such as we did in class, may vary due to rounding. If you're off by 1/100th of a point, it's probably just a rounding error. Just as with the central tendency example, JASP will give us more information about our variables. For example, we can see a histogram of both of these distributions. Click the disclosure triangle next to Plots. We would like to see the distribution plots. This will show us some histograms. By adding the density of the distribution, we can see how closely each distribution matches a normal curve. Both of these are small data sets, so the normal curve is pretty ragged. Correlation plots do not make much sense here. There is no point in looking for a relationship like, is an increase in teens saying like positively related to adults saying like? It just doesn't make sense. What does make sense here are box plots. We can see that the adult median is centered on 10, while the teen median is centered on 18. Teens use the word like nearly twice as often when describing. Add the violin element, and we can see that the distributions are shaped rather similarly. The ranges are similar. The boxes of the box plots are similarly sized, except one box plot median is higher than the other. This suggests that teens and adults have similar distributions of speaking ability, or perhaps conscientiousness, and that teens will likely refine their speaking ability with age. No need to despair about the lingual abilities of the future. The kids are all right. And, of course, we rarely compute variability without central tendency. We could get all of the other measures of central tendency, dispersion, and measures for skewness or kurtosis. Finally, you can save this file as a JASP dataset by going to Main Menu, Save As, Computer, Desktop, and then saving it as LikeLike. The new file will appear on your desktop as LikeLike.csv. Not only will this file contain all of your numeric data, it will also contain all of the analyses and plotting that you have done so far. So this is how you calculate variability in JASP.